Good morning, Ned. Ned, you've been the chair of International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame since 2017. I know that Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame is evolving and a lot of positive and progressive changes. I'm sure the open water swimming world is curious about, okay, hey, how does one get selected to International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame? And if you can just give us an overview as to what happens, uh, that would be
Okay,
awesome.
let me put it into context first, Madhu. There are 342 inductees going from the class of 1963 to the class of 2025, and there's 186 living honorees. Uh, Continuing to put it into context, um, there are 1,000 marathon swimmers competing in the El Cruce in Cancun, Mexico every May. So there are tens of thousands of swimmers who complete marathon swims every year. So it's a pretty big number of marathoners and a fairly small number in the Hall of Fame.
That's awesome, yeah. And how were the categories actually structured? Um, what are the steps to nominate somebody? Uh, what happens there? I mean, yeah, to put this question in a straightforward, how do I nominate somebody here?
Okay, so there's probably four main steps. The first step is to make a judgment of whether somebody should actually be nominated. The second step is a nomination form is submitted, and the either the nominator or the nominee participates in a verification polishing process. Number
Mhm.
three, a selection committee makes a determination whether to add this nomination to the annual ballot. And then finally, about 70 plus selectors from around the world actually vote on it.
Mhm. So the nomination form is actually on the website, right? Yeah, it's on
Correct.
the yeah. Okay, that's awesome. And can you walk us through the details of each step?
Okay. So the first step is to make a judgment whether you should nominate or not. Anybody can nominate anybody, and you can nominate yourself. The name of the nominator is never made public, so there's no societal frowning upon nominating yourself. It's actually easier in many respects. On our website, imshof.org, there's a nominee tab, and there's subtabs for criteria, process, and forms. So what I would say on that is that it's not a sport that lends itself to objective criteria, and we have five different categories. I'll give you an example. In the Australian Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, a marathon swimmer is automatically inducted if they represent the country in the Olympics or the World Championships. If we did that, we'd have more than 50 new inductees each year from around the world. So clearly, that thing doesn't work for us. And then imagine somebody put together a point system. So let's start with swimmers. How many points would you get for an Olympic 10K medal? An English Channel speed record, 25 English Channel swims, doing 100 marathons over 30 years in 20 different countries. So it's not so easy. Who would assign those points, um, and what groups would get points? And then for contributors, it's even tougher. How many points would you give a pilot with 100 English Channel swims, a coach with swimmers with 2 Olympic medals, an administrator who started a marathon now with 1,000 successes after 30 years, or an organization that runs an Ocean Sevens marathon? So I would say to people is perhaps the most important step is to go to our website and read the biographies for the inductees over the last 5 years. The person considering making a nomination should ask four questions. Which category is most appropriate? Do they meet the generally minimum criteria? Are there any ethics issues that would bar nomination? And is their career better than some of these recent honorees? The reason I say that is that the moment you start talking to somebody about a nomination, expectations naturally go up.
That's awesome. Yeah. Can you give me an example of just one criteria, Ned?
Okay, so one criteria would be that for a swimmer that's been active since after year 2000, we're generally
Mhm.
looking for about 8 years of a career minimum and at least 20 marathon swims. Now, before that, it was more difficult to find and do swims, so the criteria is a little bit less. But if a proud parent has nominated their child on the basis of one English Channel swim, and that's the only marathon they've ever done, they're probably not going to get into the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame.
And when it comes to like halls of fame, uh, that I mean, there's always like a gray area when it comes to ethics. Like, what is the IMSHA's take on that, Ned?
So we're probably the most serious organization about ethics that exists in the sporting world. And to give you some examples, we have removed two honorees for ethics violations, and we barred more than 20 from ever even being nominated. We have a stated list of ethics issues on the website, certainly not limited. The two criteria to really watch for is that no failure of a WADA test for performance enhancing drugs, which is not reversed on appeal. And it's this is how serious it is. If an honoree fails a future test in any aquatic sport, they're removed. So if I play underwater hockey at age 92 and I fail a WADA test, I will be removed. The
Okay.
second criteria, which is very, very serious, is any kind of sexual assault conviction on a child. Um, and the reason we talk to people about these criteria early is don't start trying to nominate somebody who has a serious ethics problem, because at a certain point it's going to be discovered, and the further along it gets discovered, the more embarrassing it will be and the more public it might be.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I wanted to actually ask you another tricky question. People usually, like somebody who is nominated, sometimes compare to another inductee. Like, how do we deal with that? Is there any, do you have any comments on that?
Well, so if you look back over the last 5 years, they come from all eras, all shapes and sizes. We've got pilots, we've got swimmers, we've got coaches, organizations, and administrators. So they're all very, very different. Honorees Stephen Munatonis and Dale Petronich helped run IMSHA for many years. About 10 plus years ago, they came up with a statement, which I think is kind of interesting for swimmers. And they say there's generally four kinds of swimmers. There's record holders, champions, pioneers, and endurers. So a record holder, the first one to do 4 laps of the English Channel, a champion, Olympic gold medalist, a pioneer, the first person to swim across the Irish Sea, which has not been done yet. And endurers would be the swimmers that have been at it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and just don't stop. Some swimmers would tick the boxes in more than one category, but everyone would be different in some sort of extraordinary way. If you've got an honoree that doesn't have anything like that,
Mhm.
then I'm sorry, nominee, then it's going to be probably difficult for them to get in.
Okay. So now that, okay, we have dealt with some of those gray areas and nominations, what exactly happens after somebody's nominated? What's the process of getting through the nomination and getting inducted? Like, what is the first step? Okay, I know you mentioned, I think there's about 100 nominations each year. So how does the screening work?
So the nominator would download the form from our website.
Hmm.
It doesn't hurt to check with IMSHOF if that candidate, that nominee, has already been nominated. It's a quick email, be answered within a day or two. So once they've downloaded the form, they need to have decided what category it's going to be, and you start filling in mostly the factual information. You know, what swims did they do? What organizations were they administering? What individuals did they coach? Um, as an organization, what events have they been put on? And then there's a final section called other considerations, which is supposed to be very short, but other considerations might be won an Olympic gold medal at 1,500 meters in the pool, completed 15 Ironmans, raised $20 million for charity. Now, actually, we have honorees that have done that, but perhaps 25,000 might be more typical. And then anything that distinguishes in some other category. So for a swimmer, they might also be an administrator, or an administrator might also have done some marathon swims. That
Mhm.
other considerations is generally sort of well under 5% of a nomination. When the draft is about 70% complete, send it into Imshoff, and Imshoff will advise and start helping with subsequent drafts for completeness. And during the
Mhm.
process, Imshoff will verify elements of the career. We don't accredit or ratify swims, rather, we look to verify. So, has
Mhm.
another organization ratified or credited the swim? Was there an honoree witnessing in the boat? Was there significant media coverage before or after? And then finally, we don't do controversy. If there's any dispute or any question, we just don't include the swim in a nomination. And at a certain point, the nominee must sign the form to vouch for the accuracy and truthfulness, and if there's no ethics issue. If there's a later problem in those areas, they'll likely be removed from the Hall of Fame. All nominations are confidential, and I guess finally, very important, no lobbying is allowed.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah. And can you emphasize on verification, like what happens? I know you briefly mentioned that, okay, IMSHF doesn't ratify, but
So
what's the screening and verification process, Ned?
English Channel is a good example. If somebody claims to have swum the English Channel, we're going to check Julian Critchlow's Excel spreadsheet. We're going to check the longswims.com database. We're going to check the CSA or the CSPF, one of those, to see if it's reported somewhere else. Likewise, if they have swum Catalina, we're going to check perhaps Long Swim List or the Catalina Swimming Federation to see again if we could see that. For solo swims, it can be tougher. So for a solo swim that's not been ratified in a very formal way in the last few years, we're going to be looking for some evidence of that. And
Mhm.
in the simplest example, honoree Kevin Murphy was in the boat, and he can vouch for it.
Okay.
That's a pretty good witness. We can
Mhm.
also look at media accounts where, 2 days before the swim, it was announced in the local newspaper. The day of the swim, there's pictures and there's accounts of the swim. We don't necessarily have to accept all of that, but those are good ways of having verification.
Mhm. That's awesome. Yeah. So once, like, I mean, yeah, 70 or 80 nominations come through, and is there any filtration before it gets to the selection committee? What's that process look like, Ned?
So as it goes to the screening committee, what I would say to whoever's been nominated is this is a good time to forget you've been nominated. Keep your
Mhm.
expectations under control. Every year's different. We're possibly adding 30 nominations to a ballot every year. There's no hard and fast number. Um, and then we simply don't put all of the names on the ballot for several reasons. First of all, we have about 70 plus individuals around the world who are going to do the final vote. At the best of times, this is hours of their time to read even 30 nominations. And after you've
Mhm.
read them, the decisions can be really, really tough. Um, we also might decide to hold the nomination for a year or two. If we get two nominees from the same era, the same country with very similar careers, if we put them both on a ballot, they'd probably split a vote.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we'll perhaps delay one for a year or two. And then finally, some swimmers are on we'll call it the upward part of their career. They've been banging out five or six marathons over the last few years, and it's probably going to help them to wait another couple of years and to continue swimming. We don't actually say no to anyone.
Mhm.
It goes to the screening committee. The screening committee makes a determination, and then the individual gets a fairly organizational announcement that says they've either made the ballot or
Mhm.
not. And if not, they're either going to return to the process next year, or we probably delay another 5 years or so just to see if they continue to add to their resume.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So it's the screening committee that actually does an initial vet of the list of swimmers or administrators that get into the ballot, right? Yeah.
That's correct.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And so what happens once they move to the final step of selection? Yeah.
So those nominations are placed on ballots.
Hmm.
There are different categories on the ballots. Typically, swimmers and contributors are in different categories, and then that is sent to all of the selection panel. And I say there's more than 70 of them around the world. And I just want to help people understand the metrics. And again, this is on our website. So
Hmm.
79% of those selectors have attended one of our annual induction and award ceremonies. So they're interested. They're from 28 countries and they spoke 20 different languages in the home when they were growing up. Because we are an international hall and not everyone is English.
Hmm.
16% of them were contributors, 70% of the selectors are honor swimmers, and 14% are not in the hall today. And that 14% were often looking for people from different parts of the world or different experiences which are not currently represented in the hall. They range from 20s to 80s, and they cover the last 40 years of induction classes. 49% female, 51% male. 35% are patrons in the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, which means they've donated money. 26 of them either have physical disabilities or greatly assisted swimmers with physical disabilities. Our sport is very, very forgiving for swimmers, particularly with physical disabilities. And it's one of the things that we've been focused on the last couple of years. 39 of those have competed in, and 23 have won majors. These days, majors are the World Cup Series, Olympics, and World Championships. But going back 40 years, they were all a collection of majors before World Aquatics, and before that, FINA kind of wrapped their arms around the sport. 48 have completed the English Channel. 14 have authored books. So
Hmm.
they place their votes, often ranked in categories. Those are then the top in each category are then announced as inductees or award winners.
Wow. And I know like several marathon, Hall of Fames have like public voting system, right?
Yes.
So why do we have these panels, like the screening committee and the selection committee panels? Why, like, what's the logic behind that, Ned?
Okay. So there are some public votes, and a good example is in England for football, also called soccer in other parts of the world. They have a Premier League, and the Premier League has at least two kinds of awards. They have the Footballer of the Year as voted by other footballers, and they have the People's Choice Footballer of the Year, and
Hmm.
they're often not the same. It's probably not fair to say this, but often the public votes for the one with the best hair, the coolest tattoos, and the most style on the pitch and off the pitch. Um, so because our sport is fairly niche, we don't want a public vote, and we've seen examples where if somebody really energizes their country, they can get a small country can mobilize and cast 25,000 votes. And often, the nominee from that country will win. But that's not really what we're looking for. So we have these two panels, and that gives us a very specialized, very interested and knowledgeable panel to make these determinations. I think the other thing, which is probably worth mentioning, is that the votes are not made public.
Okay.
We announce the winners in the various categories, and we don't publish the votes for all sorts of reasons, and we don't publish the names of the individuals on the screening committee or the
Okay.
selectors. And I'll give you some reasons why. A fantastic swimmer, somebody fantastic swimmer is going to end up with the lowest number of votes in their category. It's kind of bad enough that they didn't get in the Hall of Fame, but you don't really need to go public and say, well, the winner got 112 votes and you got four. It's not really the kind of
Yeah,
thing we
yeah.
want people to leave with. It leaves a bad taste. As far as the names of the voters and select and screening committee, we have kept them confidential for several reasons. I already mentioned lobbying. We had
Mhm.
cases in the past where people lobbied. It was not something we particularly liked. We didn't think it was positive. And then finally, if you make the names positive and go even further and make the votes well known, what sometimes happens is a nominee that's not particularly happy will go out on social media or even confront the individuals to either lambaste or try to justify their decisions. We've been sworn at, we've been abused in private and on social media, and we've actually never had a conversation with somebody that wasn't selected that's helped to ease their pain at all. So these days, we just don't engage. There's nothing that ever gets said that works. And then finally, perhaps the best thing we do as the executive committee is we get to make the call and we get to tell new inductees and award winners the news. I've
Mhm.
experienced screams of joy. I've seen people on a WhatsApp jumping down and into tears.
Mhm.
We then have a public announcement on social media that can draw tens of thousands of congratulations and happy reactions. Almost all the ones who are selected will end up making the next ceremony in May 2026 in San Diego, where they'll be inducted, awarded in front of their family, coach, crews, friends, and fellow inductees. And hopefully that experience will keep them interested and active as honorees for decades to come.
Awesome. Yeah. Ned, one final question. Is there anything else that we need to talk about this process?
No, I think that done correctly, um,
Mhm.
contacting somebody you admire and asking if you can nominate them. If you do it well and the expectations are kept at a minimum, it's a great opportunity for you to better understand their career. It's an
Mhm.
opportunity for them actually to understand their career. Where a swimmer might say, I didn't realize I've done more than 100 marathons. Or they say, I didn't actually think about it, but I've swum marathons in 15 countries. Or my career has been 35 years. And done right, it can bring back all sorts of positive memories for a career.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that you just can't put a price on. Whether they get
Yes.
in the hole or not, that's kind of a bonus. You can actually get a lot of joy from just having that nomination discussion.
Oh, way to go. Thank you very much, Ned. Uh, we look forward to seeing you in San Diego.
Thanks, Matthew.
Cheers. Bye-bye.